Surely, you must have heard about Adam and Eve in the Holy Bible, and perhaps are familiar with part of their story, including their fall, sin, their children, and subsequent lineage. However, in recent times, a question has arisen frequently. What language did Adam speak with Eve, their children, and grandchildren, especially considering his long life? This video was created to explore this topic and provide insights into this intriguing question. Please leave your likes, comments, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with others who may also have this same question. What language did Adam and Eve speak? Most people discuss the lineages that originated from Adam and Eve, including the descendants of Cain, the Cainites, and the lineage of Seth, also known as the Seth. Many discuss these two lineages, one considered good and the other malevolent, noting how they intertwine over time and even the corruption affecting them all since the entry of sin with Adam and Eve, the fall of their descendants due to Adam's original sin, which humanity still carries, is a recurring theme. Among the various characters of the Old Testament, Adam and Eve raise a series of doubts whenever their names are mentioned, especially about their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The subject arouses great curiosity in people who question about the descendants and the different lineages that originated from them. After all, Adam and Eve were the first humans, the oldest ancestors of humanity, the progenitors of all races and ethnicities that exist in the world today. One question that many people have asked me is about which language Adam and Eve spoke in the Garden of Eden and their descendants, both from the lineage of Cain and from the lineage of Seth, also spoke. These two languages continue to be spoken even after the flood, only stopping altogether during humanity's decline at the Tower of Babel. The only biblical information we have about this language is that it was given by God himself, and that it was the same language that God spoke, or possibly the language that the angels used to communicate with each other. God communicated with Adam through this language, which he also taught to Eve, or perhaps Eve was born already mastering this language. There are several theories that attempt to determine what this primordial language would be. Here, I will present some of these theories to you, and I look forward to seeing in the comments everyone's opinions on these interpretations. At the end of the video, I will address what the Bible really says about this language and what it could be. So let's now explore the various biblical linguistic interpretations about the original language of Adam and Eve. Let's begin by exploring the Hebrew language, its relationship. Many interpreters of the sacred scriptures argue that the language of Adam and Eve continued to be spoken until the days of Moses and the Israelites, this language being Phoenician Hebrew. However, it is questioned whether this has solid biblical foundations. Hebrew is an ancient language, about 3,400 years old, descended from the ancient Canaanite languages. In the Old Testament, it was simply called the language of Canaan, as described in the book of Isaiah. This classification as a Canaanite language brings inconsistencies, considering that linguistically it originated from the Canaanite and not from Mesopotamia, the land of origin of Abraham. Abraham came from Ur of the Chaldeans, where Sumerian and Akkadian were spoken. This is one of the interpretations debated in groups discussing biblical linguistic issues and the origin of the world's first language, some suggesting that it could be Hebrew, in addition to Hebrew. Many scholars, including Jewish rabbis with ancient traditions and texts, assert with conviction that the original language of humanity, spoken by Adam, Eve, and even Noah, was ancient Aramaic. This interpretation suggests that Aramaic was the language with which God communicated with Adam and Eve, and that they passed on this language to their descendants. Aramaic is a very ancient Semitic language similar to Arabic and sharing some similarities with ancient Hebrew. The Zohar, an important text in Jewish tradition, states that Adam and Eve spoke Aramaic and that this was their original language. Therefore, In addition to the theory that points to Hebrew as the primordial language, there's also the interpretation that advocates Aramaic as this original language. There is also a third hypothesis to consider. From this perspective, the language in question, known by some rabbis and Jews as Lashon HaKodesh, or the holy or sanctified language, is seen as an amalgamation. According to this view, Lashon HaKodesh would be a fusion of ancient Aramaic with Hebrew or even ancient Phoenician, a true blend of these two ancestral languages. Therefore, the language spoken by Adam and Eve would be this combination. In addition to these three theories, there are other linguistic proposals by various scholars, both Jewish and non-Jewish. Some suggest that the language of Adam and Eve could be Akkadian, according to certain theorists and scholars. Yes, the Akkadian language is subject to interpretation regarding the possibility of having been the language of Adam and Eve. Some argue that the language of the ancient Akkadians could be this primordial language, while others suggest that ancient Sumerian is also a possibility. Some argue that the language of the Sumerians, a Sumerian people, could be the original language. This is partly due to the fact that Akkadian is one of the oldest languages with records dating back to the present day, with Akkadian records being the oldest known to date in all languages of the world. Likewise, the earliest records of the Sumerian language contribute to this interpretation. Therefore, according to some theorists, the Akkadian language would be the main candidate, while for others, the Sumerian language could be the answer. In addition to the previous proposals, there are other interpretations and theories about what could have been the language of Adam and Eve. Many scholars have theorized about this subject over time, resulting in a variety of perspectives. One such theory suggests that the original language could be ancient Egyptian, known in Egyptian as Kemet or Kamat. According to this interpretation, the ancient Egyptian language would be the primordial language of humanity, preserved only by the ancient Egyptians over the centuries. However, over time, and with various occupations by other people such as the Hyksos, who spoke Aramaic, Ugaritic, and Phoenician, the language was gradually replaced. Additionally, conquerors like the Greeks, who colonized Egypt, and other peoples like the Romans, also contributed to linguistic change in the region. This multiplicity of influences and occupations resulted in the evolution and eventual disappearance of the ancient Egyptian language as a spoken language. According to this interpretation, the primordial language could have been ancient Egyptian. The claims in favor of this theory are essentially similar to those of Akkadian and Sumerian due to the fact that hieroglyphs, the Egyptian script, are also considered one of the oldest in the world, recorded since ancient times. It is important to note that none of them have supported biblical scriptures. There is no mention in the Bible or in any ancient apocryphal books that the language of Adam and Eve would be Hebrew, Akkadian, Aramaic, or Egyptian. And in short, these interpretations are theoretical and lack. According to most scholars and established consensus, the original language spoken by Adam and Eve is known as Adamic language. This name is derived from Adam, being called so because it is considered the primordial language. It is not Aramaic, Akkadian, Sumerian, Egyptian, or any other known language, but rather the Adamic language. The Apostle Paul makes reference to it in the New Testament, mentioning that even if he spoke the language of men and angels without love, it would be nothing. Therefore, this language is recognized as a celestial language. What we know about the sudden disappearance of this language from the earth ranges from Adam to the period of the Tower of Babel. From the Tower of Babel onward, humans, descendants of Noah, began to inherit different languages given to confuse people at that time. That is why in Genesis chapter 11, the confusion of tongues, or the story of the Tower of Babel, is mentioned. The term Babel in Hebrew means confusion, or gate of God in ancient Akkadian. In reading, we understand that there was a divine intervention, where each group descended from Shem, and Japheth, responsible for repopulating the world, was endowed with their own language. These languages varied among the branches and sub-branches of the descendants of Japheth, Ham, and Shem, along with some isolated languages that God inserted among the peoples who were building the Tower of Babel. Due to the ill intention in their hearts, God, to thwart their efforts, diversified the languages drastically, causing widespread confusion where no one understood each other anymore. From that point on, each group was dispersed to different regions of the planet, resulting in the multiplicity of languages we know today. The original language of Adam and Eve, known as Adamic, was removed from the earth by God himself, replaced by various other languages and dialects for the descendants of Noah. This occurred in the time of Noah, no longer in the time of Adam, Seth, or Enoch, when Noah's sons and grandsons were able to build the Tower of Babel. Thus, God withdrew the original celestial language and introduced a multiplicity of languages to the peoples. In summary, the primordial language spoken by Adam and Eve was Adamic, the language of angels, the very language of God. However, it is important to note that this language does not correspond to Hebrew, Aramaic, Akkadian, or any other known language today. It is a language that was removed from the earth by divine intervention. I thank all who have followed the video up to this point. If you know anyone interested in linguistic curiosities of the ancient Bible, please may everyone be under God's protection. See you soon.